I climbed the stairs to the primary bedroom, yanked off the bedding, and wrestled the king-sized mattress off the bed frame. Half carrying, half dragging it, I managed to get it down the stairs. Navigating through the hallway and out the front door, I hauled it onto the lawn, just beyond the curb. Without pausing, I returned inside, went back upstairs, and flung the sheets and blankets down the steps, trailing after them as I carried the pile outside, tossing it onto the growing heap beside the mattress. A quick glance at the clock. 4:22. I had to move fast. Everything needed to be ready by 5. I took the bed frame apart piece by piece, hauled each section out to the yard, and put it back together there. By 4:35, the bed stood fully reassembled under the fading afternoon sky. The next thing to move was the kitchen table, a relatively easy carry. Tilting it sideways to maneuver through the doorway, I set it down beside the bed. The last piece was the 6x8 area rug from the living room. Rolling it up tightly, I carried it outside and placed it near the other items. After carefully positioning the signs, I stepped back, taking a deep breath and allowing myself a moment of satisfaction. It was 4:55, 10 minutes left before she came home. I walked out to the center of the street and turned back to take in the scene. The sight was breathtaking in its cruel, deliberate beauty. Our bed, the table, the rug, all displayed on the lawn, each piece a silent witness to her betrayal, now exposed for anyone to see. These were the 3 locations where I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that my wife and her lover had repeatedly slept together over the past half year. Above each item, a sign was carefully hung, positioned high enough that no one could easily take them down. I read them again, one by one, to make sure every word was clear. The largest sign, standing front and center, declared, "These items are free to take. They have no place in this home anymore. If you can tolerate the stink of infidelity and broken promises, they're yours." Another sign, suspended over the bed, stated, "This is the bed where my wife chose to repeatedly break her vows and shatter our marriage. Twice a week, for 6 months, she met her lover here. Today was their final rendezvous." Above the kitchen table hung another. This table served as their playground, often just hours before she served me dinner right here. Over the rug, a 4th sign read, "The floor was fair game too. They made sure no surface went unused." Each sign was accompanied by an oversized, high-resolution 17x24 photograph. Explicit images capturing my wife and her boss in the act, each picture tied directly to the piece of furniture it was taken on. The last sign, placed slightly behind the table, offered a more personal touch. "My wife's lover is Greg Allen, her boss at Mitchell, Price & Allen Realty. He's married and has 3 kids. I'm not sure if his wife knows yet, but she will soon." 4:57, right on schedule. She would be home any minute. By the time I turned back toward the house, a small crowd had already gathered. Neighbors had clustered on the sidewalk and out in the street, whispering, pointing, and making phone calls. Some probably inviting friends to witness the show, others perhaps calling the police to report me. I gave a small casual wave before stepping back inside and closing the door. At exactly 5:05, her car slowly rounded the corner at the far end of the block. The crowd parted slightly as she approached, her speed dropping the moment she took in the scene, the furniture, the signs, the photos. Even from inside, I could hear her scream clear as day, cutting through the murmurs and laughter outside. "No! Oh, God, no!" Her eyes drifted from the signs to the front window where she saw me standing, watching her. Our gazes locked, and for a few excruciating seconds we stared at each other. Her face drained of color, her expression shattered. Tears ran freely down her face, her wide, pleading eyes silently begging me for answers. The same answers I needed from her. We stood that way for a heartbeat or two, frozen in silent, mutual agony. Then I turned away and quietly drew the curtains closed. I suppose it's only fair to explain how Sherry, my wife, and I ended up here, at the edge of everything we'd built together. My name is Jack Meyer. Sherry and I first crossed paths during my freshman year of college. A mutual friend thought we'd hit it off and introduced us. From the second I saw her, I was hooked. Sherry wasn't what you'd call traditionally beautiful, but there was something irresistible about her. Petite, just a hair over 5 feet, with sparkling blue eyes and sun-kissed blonde hair that fell just past her shoulders. Her small frame was perfectly balanced, delicate but curvy, with a figure that held my attention from the start. I knew right then and there that I couldn't let her slip away. We started dating almost immediately. and within a matter of weeks, we were inseparable. Just a month after we met, we slept together for the first time, an experience so intense it felt like nothing else in the world existed. I was completely obsessed with her touch, her scent, the way her body fit perfectly with mine. Neither of us was particularly experienced, but we eagerly explored each other, losing ourselves in that heady mix of young lust and infatuation. We were as in love as two people could possibly be. We got married right after graduating and moved into a modest condo in Van Nuys. Sherry earned her real estate license and landed a position at a well-known local agency, while I put my engineering degree to work at an electronics firm. Together, we built a life I thought was close to perfect, or at least I believed it was. Over the next 13 years, we lived what felt like a dream, starting out in our little condo and eventually moving into the house we'd always wanted as our careers flourished. Our lives grew fuller with the arrival of our children. First came Shelby, who's 8 now, followed 2 years later by Ryan, who's 6. Sherry and I adored them both, and they became the heart and soul of our world. So how did everything fall apart? Honestly, I still don't know. I wish I could say there were hints, warning signs I missed, or subtle shifts in our relationship that I ignored. But the reality is, I was clueless, blissfully unaware, living inside a bubble of love and blind trust. I never once suspected anything was wrong. That bubble didn't pop until fate intervened, all thanks to Shelby falling ill at school. It was a Thursday, just before lunchtime, when I got a call from the school nurse. "Mr. Meyer? Shelby's not feeling well. It seems like a stomach bug or the flu," she explained. I was right in the middle of a staff meeting and couldn't leave immediately, so I asked her to try Sherry instead. "My wife should be able to pick her up," I said. The nurse replied that she'd already tried reaching Sherry at work, only to be told Sherry wouldn't be available for most of the day. She'd also called our house, left a message on Sherry's cell, and gotten no response. With no other option, she reached out to me again, stressing that Shelby needed to be picked up as soon as possible. I quickly apologized to my team, gathered my things, and left the office. I drove straight to the school, picked up Shelby, and headed home. But as I hit the garage door opener, I felt my stomach tighten. Parked inside, in the spot where my car should have been, was a vehicle I didn't recognize, right next to Sherry's. My chest tightened, and a lump formed in my throat. My mind raced to rationalize, to push the thought away. No, that couldn't be it. There had to be a logical explanation. There was no way the woman I loved, my wife, my partner, my best friend, could be cheating on me. That was impossible, wasn't it? But why was there a stranger's car in my garage? Something was clearly off and I needed answers. But first, I had to shield Shelby from whatever was going on. "Sweetheart, can you wait here for a minute?" I asked. "Why? I'm tired." "I want to lay down," she complained. "I know, honey, but I think the pest control guy's here spraying for bugs. The chemicals could make you feel even worse," I said, fabricating the first excuse that popped into my head. It was the first time I'd ever lied to her. "Let me go check, okay? I'll come get you in a second." She sighed in frustration, but leaned her head back and closed her eyes. I stepped into the house as quietly as possible through the side door off the kitchen, hoping I'd find Sherry chatting with a friend over coffee or maybe working on some paperwork at the kitchen table. But the kitchen was empty. I moved into the living room, expecting to see her watching TV or talking on the phone. No sign of her there either. Then I heard it, her laugh, bright and familiar, floating down from upstairs. My heart plummeted. The only rooms upstairs were the bedrooms. My legs felt like they'd turned to lead, but I forced myself to move forward. Whatever was happening, I needed to know the truth. I crept up the stairs, my footsteps muffled by the carpet. Shelby's door was open, her room empty, and her bed neatly made. Ryan's door was closed, but before I could peek inside, I heard her laugh again. This time, unmistakably coming from our bedroom. My pulse thundered in my ears. I inched closer to the door, holding my breath, and listened. At first, all I heard was silence. Then, faintly, the bed creaked, a slow, steady rhythm tapping against the wall. Sherry's voice followed. "Oh, God, Greg, that's perfect. Don't stop," she moaned. A man's voice responded, smug, confident. "You like that, baby?" "More than anything, Greg. You know you're the best I've ever had," she answered breathlessly. "Better than your husband?" he asked, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Please, don't call Jack weak," she panted between gasps. "He loves me. He tries so hard, But every time we're together, all I can think about is you, your touch, the way you feel inside me. You're the only one who satisfies me. A cold numbness spread through me. My wife, the woman I'd worshipped for over a decade, couldn't even stand being with me. Every time we made love, she was imagining him. I needed to see it for myself. No matter how much it would hurt, I had to witness the truth with my own eyes. But I couldn't let them know I was there. My marriage was already dead. I just needed the evidence to bury it. With my heart splintered into 1,000 jagged pieces, I eased the door open a crack and looked inside. What I saw extinguished any remaining trace of the love I'd once felt for her. Sherry lay undressed across our bed, her body entwined with Greg Allen, her boss, a man I knew well from her office parties, the same man who always shook my hand and grinned like a friend. Now, that same man was pressed against her, moving inside her, their bodies tangled in the sheets where we had once made love. My first instinct was to rip the door open and smash Greg's face into the floor, but I knew that would only get me arrested. Besides, he hadn't coerced her. She'd given herself to him, freely, enthusiastically, passionately. That hurt more than anything. Somehow I managed to slip back down the stairs, closing the garage door behind me as I got back in the car. My hands were shaking, but I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. "Daddy, where are we going? I want to go home. I feel really bad." Shelby's soft voice came from the back seat. "I know, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was right about the pest control stuff. The air in the house isn't safe right now. I only went inside for a minute, and I already feel a little sick too. It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't completely a lie either. "Let's go to Grandma's for a bit until the house airs out, okay?" The drive to my mom's house, which should have taken only 15 minutes, felt like it stretched into hours. My thoughts were a storm spinning wildly in my head. My marriage was done, completely destroyed. There was no salvaging what I'd seen. I could never look at the woman sprawled across our bed, begging her lover for more, and see the wife I thought I knew. My bed, my home, my life. I slammed my fist into the steering wheel, my vision blurring with tears. I couldn't hold back. "Daddy, are you okay?" Shelby's soft voice broke through the storm. "I'm okay, sweetheart," I answered, though my voice cracked. "Really? Don't worry, everything's fine." I dropped her off at my mom's house, telling her I'd be back to pick her up in a couple of hours. I couldn't bring myself to say anything to my mom about what had happened. Instead, I lied, something about work being overwhelming, and asked if she could watch Shelby for a little while. Every fiber of my being wanted to drive straight home, storm inside, and confront them both. But I knew words alone wouldn't be enough. I didn't just want a confrontation. I needed something bigger. I wanted payback. As I drove back to work, the beginnings of a plan flickered to life in my mind. My company had a technology division that specialized in advanced security systems. By the time I reached my office, I'd made up my mind. I told my assistant to hold all my calls and not to interrupt me for anything. I picked up my phone and dialed Dan Taylor, an old friend from college, and one of the smartest engineers I knew. As soon as he answered, I got straight to the point. "Dan, I need you here right away." There was a brief pause before his concerned voice came through the line. "Jack, you okay, man? You sound off." "Just get here, please." About 20 minutes later, Dan walked into my office. The moment he saw me, his expression darkened. "Jesus, Jack, you look like someone ran you over." I let out a humorless chuckle. "In a way, they did." His brows furrowed. "What happened?" I took a steadying breath before answering. I walked in on Sherry and her boss. They were in my bed together. Dan's face twisted in disbelief. "Are you kidding me?" "I wish I was," I exhaled sharply. "I went to pick up Shelby from school. When we got home, there was a car in my garage I didn't recognize. I went inside, and there they were." "Damn, I'm so sorry, man." He shook his head. "Did you call them out?" "No." I shook my head too. Shelby wasn't feeling well, and I couldn't let her see any of it. I left quietly, took her to my mom's, and now I'm here. Dan leaned against my desk, arms crossed. "So what's your next move?" "I need proof," I said, my voice firm. "Video, audio, the whole thing. Next time they meet, I want it all documented." Dan's expression sharpened. "You want surveillance gear?" "Something discreet," I confirmed. "Small enough to hide around the house. Cameras, microphones, I need it all." Dan nodded slowly. "I can set you up. But are you sure they'll be back?" Maybe this was the first time. No chance, I said firmly. I overheard them talking. This has been going on for months. They probably use my house because it's empty during the day. His wife is home and they can't risk a hotel. My place is their perfect hideout. We spent the next few minutes going over the details. Dan mentioned that his department was testing a new line of wireless micro cameras and audio recorders. They were small, high resolution, and could stream directly to my laptop or desktop. He also had a tiny voice recorder I could slip under the driver's seat in Sherry's car to capture anything she said while driving. It would only catch her side of conversations, but it was better than nothing. I thanked him and promised to swing by his office the next day to pick up the gear. That evening, walking back into my house was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I had no idea how I was supposed to look Sherry in the eye and pretend I didn't know. The only strategy I could think of was to act like I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't far from the truth. I collected Shelby from my mom's and we headed home. Sherry was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something on the stove when we walked in. The moment her eyes landed on Shelby, her face paled, and panic flashed across her features. "Where have you been? Why didn't you call me? The school left a message saying Shelby was sick. I just heard it now," she said, her voice shrill. "The school tried calling you," I replied evenly. "But they couldn't reach you. Your office said you weren't available. They left a message at home. Tried your cell, but it went straight to voicemail." "Oh my God," she muttered, hand to her forehead. "I must have turned my phone off when I was showing a house. Today's been nonstop." "Sure it has," I thought bitterly. "Nonstop screwing your boss in our bed." Sherry swept Shelby into a hug, kissing her forehead and whispering apologies into her hair. Whatever else she was, Sherry truly did love our kids. That part of her was real. It was me who no longer mattered. Once Shelby was tucked upstairs, Sherry returned to the kitchen to finish cooking. "I'm not feeling great either," I said. "I think I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, just in case I'm coming down with something." She stepped closer and pressed a hand to my forehead. "You do feel warm, and you look pale." "No kidding," I thought. "Seeing your wife undressed with another man tends to do that." I said nothing more, just turned and headed upstairs. The very thought of walking into our bedroom made my skin crawl, but I needed my things, my razor, toothbrush, and clothes for work. Forcing myself into the room, I was struck by the sterile stillness. The windows were open, fresh air washing in, and the bed had been remade with clean sheets. The stench of Zex was gone, but I knew exactly what had taken place there. The anger churned inside me, hot and seething, but I forced it back down. I needed to stay in control. My revenge was coming, and I had to be patient. I gathered what I needed and slipped into the guest room, closing the door behind me. Stripping down to my boxers, I lay on the bed, my body heavy with exhaustion and grief. The urge to scream, to cry, to destroy something clawed at me, but I fought it off. There was no time for tears. I had a mission now, and I wasn't going to let emotions get in the way of what came next. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Sleep never came. After Sherry finished dinner, got the kids settled, and tucked them in for the night, she quietly stepped into the guest room. I kept my eyes shut, my breathing slow and even, pretending I was asleep. I felt her fingertips brush lightly against my forehead before she slipped back out and gently closed the door behind her. The following morning, I was up and out of the house before anyone else stirred. Since Sherry usually handled the school drop-offs, I didn't have to stick around. I showered, dressed, and left before she even realized I was gone. Whatever she thought about it didn't matter anymore. I just needed to escape the place that used to feel like a home built on love and loyalty. The home I now knew was nothing more than a monument to my own blindness. I'd spent over a decade living in a fantasy, and the reality hit me like a gut punch. I made it to work before the rest of the office, brewed some coffee, and sat at my desk to map out my next steps. First on the list was cutting off our shared credit cards and moving half of our savings and checking funds into an account under my name alone. After that, I'd update my life insurance, my retirement plan, and my will, removing Sherry entirely and naming only Shelby and Ryan as my beneficiaries. It stunned me how quick and easy it was to start unraveling a marriage that had lasted 13 years. Some part of me knew the emotional fallout would hit me eventually, the grief, the loss, but I didn't have time for that now. There was too much to do. I also needed to find a sharp divorce attorney, someone capable of protecting me if Sherry tried to get clever. Even though her cheating wouldn't directly impact how assets were divided thanks to the no-fault divorce laws here, it could be a valuable card to play when it came to custody. No matter how much I despised her now, I didn't want to erase her from the kids' lives. But I was determined to secure shared custody, making sure I stayed an equal and constant presence in their world. I forced myself not to think about the things she'd said to Greg, how much better he was than me, how I was little more than a stand-in. If I let myself dwell on those words now, I knew I'd unravel completely. That collapse would have to wait. Today was about strategy, not heartbreak. Once my plan was mapped out, I called Dan's office. He was already in and assured me the surveillance gear would be ready by noon. He even offered to come help install it and walk me through how everything worked. By the time my phone rang, Sherry's name glowing on the screen, my resolve was firmly in place. I stared at the phone for a few seconds before answering. Her voice, once so soft and comforting, now only made my stomach turn. "Hey, baby, how are you feeling?" she asked, sounding so sweet, so fake. "My stomach's still off," I said, keeping my tone flat. "I'm worried about you," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "You were gone so early this morning, I didn't even get to check on you. I just needed to take care of some things at work, so I went in early. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I don't know what I'd do if anything ever happened to you. You, Shelby, and Ryan, you're my everything." What a joke. Out loud, I only said, "I'll be fine." "Well, maybe after the kids go to bed tonight, we could find a little alone time," she purred, her voice sliding into the tone that used to make me weak. Once I would have jumped at that offer, desperate to believe she still wanted me, that we were still us. Not anymore. Not after what I'd witnessed. She was going to get exactly what she deserved. "We'll see how I'm feeling," I said coolly. "Wow, you must really be under the weather if you're turning down some quality time with your wife," she teased, trying to sound playful. "There's just a lot on my mind," I replied. "I'll see you tonight. I should be home around 6, and please, if you need anything at all, just call. I'll be in the office all day." That was exactly what I'd hoped to hear. I called Dan back to confirm everything was ready. A little after noon, he met me at the house, and together we spent the afternoon installing the equipment. By 3:30, we had every piece tested and running smoothly. Dan helped set up a secure folder on my home computer where all the footage would be automatically stored. Every room was covered: the living room, the kitchen, the guest room, and most importantly, the master bedroom. The bedroom got extra attention. We placed 4 cameras there, each one positioned to capture every corner, every angle. No matter where they ended up, I'd have the entire show: clear video, crystal clear audio. We also mounted a discreet camera and mic in the master bathroom, just in case they felt the urge to extend their fun into the shower. Every camera was motion activated, starting to record the moment anyone stepped into range. Everything was ready. That evening was brutal. I couldn't fake being sick again, so after dinner and getting the kids to bed, I followed Sherry into our room like nothing was wrong. What happened next wasn't closeness. It was just an act. Mechanic, detached. Her touch felt foreign, her body unfamiliar, and I had to fight the bile rising in my throat when she moaned, "Oh, Jack, you always know how to make me feel amazing. No one could ever love me the way you do. Promise you'll keep doing this to me forever." There was no tenderness afterward, no warmth. I turned away, facing the wall, pretending to drift off. I felt her confusion. We'd always curled up together after sex. When she eventually moved closer, her arm draped around my waist, she whispered, "Jack, I'm sorry if I didn't make you happy tonight." "You always have, Sherry," I said softly. Sometimes I wonder if I'm enough for you." Her voice quivered with shock. "Why would you even say that? You're everything to me. I can't even imagine my life without you. As long as I have you, I'll never need anyone else. You've always been the perfect lover, Jack." "Always." "Maybe," I said, keeping my voice even. "Sometimes it's hard to believe." "Jack, what's going on? Why are you saying these things?" "Nothing," I lied. "I'm just tired." I felt her body tremble slightly against mine, and after a few minutes, I heard her quiet, muffled crying. I didn't comfort her. I didn't feel sorry for her. I only wondered if those tears were from guilt, or if she was crying because she thought I was being cold to her. I was up before Sherry the next morning, giving me the perfect chance to slip into the garage and discreetly place the voice recorder beneath the driver's seat of her car. Before leaving, I also pulled up the recordings from the night before to make sure all the cameras were functioning correctly, even in the dim lighting. They worked flawlessly. Crisp video, clear audio, everything I needed. When Sherry finally woke, her mood seemed slightly off. "You said something last night that hurt me," she said softly. Before I could say a word, she leaned in, planted a light kiss on my cheek, and just like that, her mood brightened. Probably because she already knew she'd be seeing her boss later that day. I poured her some coffee and casually mentioned I'd be tied up in my office most of the day. Her smile was bright and carefree. "I've got a few showings lined up. If all goes well, I might close a big sale. Don't worry, I'll still pick up the kids after school." I gave her a quick peck on the cheek and headed for the door. "Hey, Jack," she called after me. "Aren't you forgetting something? You always tell me you love me before you leave. You know how much that means to me." "Sorry," I replied, keeping my tone flat. "I just assumed you knew." "It's okay this time," she said with a playful smile. "But don't forget, a girl needs to hear her man say those words." I promised myself the next time I said them, they wouldn't be for her, if I ever found someone worth trusting again. Her comments about her schedule only reinforced what I already suspected. She had every intention of spending part of her workday with her real priority, and frankly, I was ready for it. The waiting, the pretending, it was exhausting. I wanted this over. I spent the morning actually getting work done, though my mind kept drifting to the clock. By noon, I told my assistant I'd be out for a while and grabbed the keys to the company van. I drove it to a spot across the street from our house, where I had a clear, unobstructed view of the driveway. Right on cue, a little after 1 o'clock, Sherry's car pulled up. She parked in the garage and slipped into the house, leaving the garage door wide open, a clear invitation. Sure enough, within 10 minutes, a familiar vehicle rolled into the driveway. It was the same car that had occupied my spot the day I caught them, the car of Greg Allen, her boss and partner in Infidelity. He didn't hesitate, driving straight into the garage like he belonged there. As the door lowered behind him, effectively hiding them from view, I felt that familiar surge of white-hot rage. They weren't even trying to be discreet anymore. My home, my family's space, had become their playground, and they treated it like their personal hideaway. Whether they thought they were untouchable or just didn't care, they were about to learn how wrong they were. Soon, I'd have all the evidence I needed. For more than a decade, I'd believed my wife was faithful, that we were both committed to the life we built together. The idea of her cheating had never even crossed my mind until the suspicion took hold. And once it did, it never let go. Was Greg really so much better than me? What made him worth the risk? Worth jeopardizing her marriage, her family, and even his own? Did she honestly believe I wouldn't eventually tell his wife? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made, but it no longer mattered. All I cared about now was exposing them. Part of me wanted to kick down the door and confront them in the middle of their little rendezvous, but I knew better. What would that really accomplish? Screaming at them or throwing a punch might feel good in the moment, but it wouldn't erase the betrayal. They weren't worth my energy. My focus now was on the innocent ones, my children and Greg's. They were the ones who would suffer for this, and unlike their selfish parents, I actually cared about that. By 2:30, their session was over. The garage door rose and Greg backed out, driving off like nothing happened. 15 minutes later, Sherry followed, closing the door behind her. I didn't feel the need to review all the footage right away. I just wanted to be sure the system had captured everything. A quick check was all it took to confirm I had exactly what I needed. Even just a few minutes of video was more than enough. They'd left no room for doubt. This wasn't a one-off, and it wasn't innocent flirting gone too far. They were comfortable, casual, and completely at home in my house, in my bed. They started at the kitchen table, the same table where we sat as a family. I listened as they laughed, openly joking about how many times they'd used that table and wondering if I'd ever figure out I was eating where they'd been screwing. They made their way upstairs, but not before Greg made a disgusting suggestion, proposing they try it in Shelby's room for variety. That was the only time Sherry put her foot down. "No way," she snapped. "It's bad enough I'm rubbing this in Jack's face. I'm not dragging the kids into it." At least there was one boundary she wasn't willing to cross, though it did nothing to ease my disgust. Once in the master bedroom, they stripped down and spent the next 40 minutes together, moving across the bed like it was theirs. One thing struck me, despite all their physical passion. Neither of them ever said, "I love you." But Sherry made sure to tell Greg over and over that no one had ever satisfied her the way he did. Their finale took place on the living room rug, right in front of the fireplace. When they were done, Greg dressed and left, and Sherry took a quick shower before heading out to pick up the kids. Surprisingly, she didn't change the sheets, though I assumed she planned to later, before I got home. She had just enough time to air out the room and cover her tracks. Once I had all the footage safely saved, I shut off the recording system and left the house. I didn't bother checking the bedroom or looking for any trace of them. I didn't need to. I'd seen more than enough. My heart was already numb, but beneath that numbness was a fire burning hotter than ever. A slow, controlled fury that came with knowing exactly how I would destroy them. Back at the office, I filled Dan in on everything I'd seen and heard. Like me, he couldn't understand how Sherry, who had always seemed like a loving wife and doting mom, could be capable of something so cruel and calculated. She hadn't just broken our vows, she'd mocked me behind my back, turning me into a joke while telling her lover that he was the only man who could ever satisfy her. For over 13 years, I'd occasionally asked Sherry if she'd ever daydreamed about being with someone else. Every single time, she'd wrinkle her nose in mock disgust, calling the idea revolting and swearing she could never even imagine it. Yet there she was, not only living out those very fantasies, but savoring every moment of her betrayal. All while I went about my days, blissfully unaware. The weight of that realization dragged me into a dark place, but I couldn't let it break me. Not yet. There was still work to do. I asked Dan if he could connect me with a solid divorce attorney, preferably someone experienced in protecting husbands during high-conflict separations. He pointed me toward the firm our company worked with for corporate legal matters, and one of their senior attorneys gave me a short list of 3 highly recommended divorce lawyers. The first attorney I called was on the verge of retiring and wasn't accepting new cases. The second, however, had an opening the following afternoon at 3. I booked the appointment and spent the rest of my afternoon tying up loose ends, canceling our shared credit cards, revising my life insurance and retirement plan to remove Sherry, and transferring half of the funds from our joint accounts into a new account solely in my name. That evening, when I stepped through the front door, Sherry was in the kitchen cheerfully making dinner while the kids sat at the table working on their homework. She was wearing the soft yellow sundress I'd always loved on her, and for the briefest moment, my resolve wavered. She gave me a bright smile, the picture of a happy, devoted wife. "Hi, honey," she called out, her voice full of warmth. "How's my favorite man? I hope your day was half as good as mine." Her words made me pause. "It was eye-opening," I said. "Not exactly great, but I definitely learned a few things I wasn't expecting." She didn't catch my meaning. "What made your day so fantastic?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Grinning, she practically glowed. "I finally closed a sale. First one this week, and it looks like I've got a solid lead on another one for Thursday." "Sounds like you're on a roll," I said flatly. "Anything else exciting happen today? Cross paths with anyone? Interesting?" She gave me a quick, confused glance. "Nope, just work. Showing houses, talking to clients. You know, the usual grind. Honestly, the best part of my day is always coming home to you and the kids." I didn't bother replying. Later, upstairs, I found fresh sheets on the bed and the bedroom window cracked open to let in the evening air. A thin layer of water still clung to the shower floor, something that immediately struck me as odd. When I headed back to the kitchen, I asked casually, "Did you take a shower this afternoon?" She flinched so slightly most people wouldn't have noticed, her head whipping toward me with a flash of panic before she quickly masked it. "What? No. Why would I do that?" "I don't know," I said, keeping my voice light. "Just seems strange. There's still water pooled in the shower. It usually drains pretty fast." "Oh," she said, her pitch just a hair too high. "It's probably that clogged drain again. You know how it backs up sometimes." Maybe." I gave her a long look. "Unless, of course, someone's using our house for their secret rendezvous and needs a quick rinse before heading back to their real life." She froze, her hands still gripping a head of lettuce she was tearing apart for the salad. For a beat, she didn't move or speak. Then she forced out an awkward laugh. "You always were creative," she said, her voice brittle. "Maybe I'm just perceptive," I replied. "Sometimes I feel like I can read minds." She turned back to the salad, her movements stiffer than before. "Well, if you could read my mind, you'd know how much I love you," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I didn't bother answering. "Let me know when dinner's ready," I said, turning toward my office. She shot me one last uncertain glance, her smile faltering. Dinner was a quiet affair. Sherry's confusion deepened when I sat in her usual seat, leaving my usual chair empty. "Why are you sitting there?" she asked hesitantly. "That's my spot." "Sometimes it's nice to change things up," I said mildly. She gave me a wary look, picking at her meal more than eating it, rearranging food on her plate like a child trying to avoid vegetables. The silence would have been oppressive if not for the kids filling it with chatter about school, their friends, and whatever else popped into their heads. Sherry and I stuck to basic conversation, keeping up appearances for their sake. After we cleaned up from dinner, I retreated to my office to get back to work on the next phase of my plan. I reviewed the surveillance footage, selecting the clearest, most damning images and sending them to my large format Epson printer. Each photo was blown up into a sharp 17x24 image, impossible to miss. Below each, I added captions, blunt, undeniable statements that would leave no room for interpretation. With that done, I was nearly ready. The only remaining steps were my appointment with the divorce attorney, tying up the financial details, and waiting for their next little get-together, which, thanks to Sherry's own slip-up, I knew was likely scheduled for Thursday. That night, when I finally went to bed, Sherry was already there, either asleep or pretending to be. It didn't matter. My actions had clearly left her uneasy, but I didn't care anymore. Nothing she could say, no tearful confession or last-minute explanation could undo what she'd already done. Her betrayal was complete, and now, the only thing left was deciding just how devastating her downfall would be. The next morning, I was up and out of the house before she stirred. I had a full list of tasks to tackle before my afternoon meeting with the lawyer. My first stop was HR, where I officially updated my life insurance and retirement account beneficiaries, removing Sherry and ensuring everything would go to Shelby and Ryan. The HR rep gave me a curious look, but didn't press the issue, and I didn't feel any obligation to explain. After that, I canceled every joint credit card we shared and opened a new account entirely in my own name. From there, I went to the bank and moved exactly half of the money from our joint checking and savings accounts into a newly opened account that only I could access. The house itself would have to be dealt with eventually, but that was a conversation for my attorney. It seemed likely Sherry would be allowed to stay there with the kids, at least for now. But the final decision could wait. I had bigger plans to put in motion. At exactly 3 o'clock, I sat down across from my attorney, a no-nonsense guy who got straight to the point. His first words were blunt. "You should prepare yourself. In cases like this, courts almost always favor the mother when it comes to custody. Odds are, she'll end up with the house. And you'll be splitting everything down the middle, even if you've got proof of her affair." I leaned forward, my expression set. "Draft the most aggressive petition you can," I said. He gave me a skeptical glance. "You're unlikely to walk away with everything, no matter what kind of evidence you have." "Leave that to me," I replied. "I have a way of persuading people." Though he clearly wasn't a fan of my tone, he didn't argue. By the time I left, the paperwork was already in motion. Sherry would be served Friday morning. On top of that, I asked him to file a civil suit against Greg Allen and his real estate company for intentional interference with my marriage. That paperwork would be ready to go out the same day. The wheels were officially turning. That evening, when I walked into the house, my demeanor toward Sherry was icy. There was no anger left, no sadness, only a numb resolve. I knew the pain would return eventually, but right now, I was laser-focused on seeing this through. One way or another, Sherry and Greg were going to feel every ounce of the humiliation and misery they'd inflicted on me. Dinner was polite but hollow. Shallow conversation, forced smiles for the sake of the kids. Afterward, I retreated to my office, my private sanctuary, to finish the final preparations. I reviewed the footage again, selecting the sharpest, most damning still frames and feeding them into my large format printer. I enlarged each one into massive 17x24 prints, adding captions that made the context unmistakable. No excuses, no misunderstandings, just undeniable truth. I also drafted a letter addressed to Greg Allen's wife, enclosing several choice images, and letting her know I had hours of video to back it all up if she wanted proof for her own legal battles. A little after 11, I quietly checked in on Sherry. Once I was sure she was asleep, I slipped into the garage and retrieved the small recorder I'd hidden under her car seat. Back in my office, I rewound it and listened. I could only hear her half of the conversations, but it was more than enough. Her voice was warm and syrupy, the kind of tone she hadn't used with me in years. "Hi, baby," she purred. "Thank you for such a perfect afternoon." A pause while she listened. "I miss you already," she added, her voice soft and dripping with affection. Another giggle. "A whole week together would be amazing." Then with clear excitement, "I can't wait to see you Thursday." The call ended with a sickly, sweet, "Bye, my love." What surprised me most was how little any of it affected me. There was no fresh sting, no gut punch. Maybe it was because, in my mind, her fantasy life with Greg was already becoming her reality, and that reality was about to crash down around her. It turns out, planning someone's complete downfall is remarkably effective at numbing pain. I swapped out the recorder's tape for a fresh one, slid it back under her seat, and returned to bed. With any luck, I'd capture her reaction when her world collapsed the next day. That night, I barely slept, not because of heartache, but because I was electrified with anticipation. I lay there, mentally replaying every step of my plan, every move that would lead to the grand finale. It was seamless, airtight. The satisfaction of knowing they were walking into their own trap was almost intoxicating. At dawn, I stood at the foot of the bed, watching Sherry sleep. Once, this was the woman I couldn't wait to spend my life with. The mother of my children, my partner, my love. For a moment, something raw and painful stirred in my chest, but I forced it down. That chapter was done. I would never hold her again, never share quiet moments or whispered plans for the future. Our future was gone. As I turned to leave, I wondered if she had even the faintest idea of how much her choices were about to cost her. Maybe she thought the worst-case scenario was a messy divorce. She was so wrong. Soon enough, she'd understand exactly what her betrayal was worth. I grabbed breakfast at a diner near my office, then stopped in briefly to let my assistant know I'd be unreachable for most of the day. I called Dan to let him know everything was on schedule. "Good luck, Jack," he said. "Just be careful, and call me when it's over." After hanging up, I made a quick stop at my lawyer's office to double-check that all the paperwork, the divorce filing, and the lawsuit against Greg and his company was locked and loaded for Friday morning. It was all ready. After that, I called Sherry. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone casual. "I'll grab the kids from school today. Mom wants them to stay at her place for the long weekend, so I'll swing by the house around 3:45 to pack their things." "That's great," Sherry said, sounding genuinely excited. Her voice dropped into that playful, sultry tone she used when she wanted to set the mood. "That means you and I have all day Saturday to enjoy some alone time." "Yeah," I said, my voice void of emotion. "Sounds good?" I ended the call before she could say anything else. I couldn't stomach her lies anymore. There was no need to rush home, so around 12:30, I parked a block over where I had a clear view of the house but wouldn't be seen. I didn't need to watch to know exactly how the next couple of hours would unfold, but I wanted to be there, to see it with my own eyes. At 12:50, right on schedule, Sherry's car rolled into the driveway. 5 minutes later, Greg's car followed. They were creatures of habit, completely predictable, oblivious to the noose tightening around them. Sitting there in my borrowed van, I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak, not even disgust. Watching them felt like observing someone else's life. Detached, like flipping through the channels of a trashy reality show with a guaranteed explosive ending. At 2:50, Greg's car backed out of the garage and drove off. 10 minutes later, Sherry followed, her car disappearing down the street. Once the coast was clear, I pulled into the garage, closed the door behind me, and went straight to work. In my office, I brought up the latest recording, fast-forwarding through just enough footage to confirm I had exactly what I needed. There they were, smug, comfortable, treating my house like their private love nest. I didn't need to watch much. The proof was undeniable, and my detachment remained intact. Satisfied, I spent the next 10 minutes carrying the oversized prints, the damning photographic evidence, upstairs, leaning them against the front door so they'd be easy to grab when the time came. Everything was ready. The curtain was about to rise on the final act, and I was prepared to play my part to perfection. After gathering a few sets of clothes and essentials for Shelby and Ryan, I packed everything into the car. The only real weight on my heart was knowing how much this situation would eventually hurt them, the two people I loved most in the world. But as much as it pained me, I found solace in one undeniable truth. None of this was my doing. the blame lay solely with their mother. It was her selfish choices that had shattered our family. At 3:15, I pulled up to the school just as the final bell rang. When I told the kids they'd be spending the weekend at Grandma's, they cheered. To them, it was an unexpected treat. Grandma spoiled them endlessly, and they knew it. 45 minutes later, after hugging my mom goodbye, I got back in my car and headed home to finish what I'd started. And that brought me right back to the moment where everything unraveled. The furniture on the lawn, the bold-lettered signs, the gathering crowd, and the look of sheer devastation on Sherry's face when she saw her double life laid bare for the entire neighborhood. I had expected some kind of response from her that night, a desperate phone call, a knock at the door, anything. But the only visitors I got were the police. They showed up about an hour after she sped off. They weren't aggressive, not even hostile. In fact, they seemed more sympathetic than anything. But they made it clear. I had to take the signs and photos down. If I refused, they'd have no choice but to charge me with disturbing the peace and public indecency. I complied without argument. The damage had already been done. Sherry had seen the truth in broad daylight, and the look on her face told me her world was already crumbling. That was enough for now. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache, the kind that came from too much whiskey and too little sleep. But even through the haze, I felt different, stronger. There was sadness, yes, an emptiness that would take time to fade, but there was also a deep, unwavering clarity. I had started down this road, and I was going to see it through. By noon, I pulled back the curtains and surveyed the front yard. The bed, the table, and the rug were gone. Only the stained mattress and the tangled mess of sheets remained. I figured I'd either haul them off or set them on fire later. The morning passed in eerie silence, until 3 o'clock, when everything came crashing down. First, my lawyer called. "Greg Allen's wife got the letter and photos this morning," he said, and Sherry and Greg were both served at work. He had been there when it happened. Sherry, he told me, completely broke down, sobbing and collapsing onto the office floor in front of everyone. Greg, however, barely spared her a glance. Instead, he stormed through the building, shouting threats about how he was going to eliminate me. His tantrum was cut short when his business partners handed him a severance check. Greg refused to take it at first, but then they quoted a section of their corporate charter, one that covered ethics clauses and workplace relationships. Under company policy, they had every right to sever ties with employees engaging in misconduct, especially when it compromised the firm's reputation. He was out, effective immediately. As Greg stood there, fuming, the receptionist told him his wife was on the phone. She had received my package, and she wasn't calling to beg for an explanation. She was calling to tell him not to come home. She had already hired a divorce attorney and planned to file the next day. Later, I got a call from a friend, one of the husbands of Sherry's coworkers. According to him, after Greg was thrown out, no one in the office would even look at Sherry. They simply turned their backs as she lay curled up on the floor, weeping for half an hour. Eventually, she managed to collect herself and leave, but no one knew where she had gone. The following day, she finally called me. Her voice was raw, hoarse, like she had spent the entire night crying. "Where are the kids?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Do they know?" "They're with my mom," I replied. "They don't know anything, and they won't hear any of it from me." A pause, then softly, "Thank you." After a long silence, she asked if she could stop by to pick up some of her things. "That's fine," I said. "Just let me know when. I'll make sure I'm not home." "Can you stay?" she pleaded. "Can we talk?" "I don't have anything to say to you, Sherry." Her breath hitched, then the inevitable tears. "Jack, I'm so sorry. You have to know how sorry I am. I never meant to hurt you." I let out a cold, humorless laugh. "How can you say that? That you never meant to hurt me? What exactly did you think was going to happen when I found out? Did you expect me to shake Greg's hand and wish you two the best?" "I never wanted you to find out," she admitted weakly. "I love you, Jack. I've never loved anyone but you." I shook my head. "I don't even think you believe that, Sherry. How could you? After everything you said to Greg, after you told him he was the only man who could truly satisfy you, after you mocked me in my own bed?" "I never said that," she protested. "Jack, I would never." "You did, Sherry." I cut her off. "I have it all recorded. Every word, every insult, every time you tore me down just to make him feel like a king." She broke down completely, sobbing into the phone. "I love you, Jack. You have to believe me. I don't even know why I said those things. I didn't mean them. Greg always complained about how his wife made him feel small, and I was just trying to make him feel better. So, let me get this straight, I said, my voice dripping with disgust. For 6 months, you degraded me? Your husband, the father of your kids, just to stroke your lover's ego? That's your excuse? Yes, she whimpered. I swear, I never wanted to hurt you. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the rage from spilling over. No one forced you, Sherry. No one made you spread your legs for him in our home. And I can't believe it took me this long to realize how pathetic you really are. Jack, please, I don't love him. I love you. Just let me fix this. I'll do anything. This doesn't have to be the end of us. I exhaled slowly. It already is. She started pleading then, bargaining, throwing out desperate promises, none of which meant a damn thing. I don't love you anymore, Sherry, I said, my voice like ice. And I didn't leave you. You left me. You left me every single time you invited Greg into our bed. Every time you laughed at me behind my back. You don't destroy someone you love. You don't humiliate them. Tears streamed down her face. I don't want a divorce. I don't care, I said. You're getting one. She hesitated. Why did you have to tell Greg's wife? She sobbed. That wasn't fair. I almost laughed at the sheer audacity of it. Fair? You're actually talking to me about fairness. You wrecked our marriage, shattered our family, and you're upset that I exposed the truth. Greg stole my wife. He took everything I believed was mine. Why the hell wouldn't I tell his wife? But they're kids, Jack. So do I, Sherry, I snapped. And I actually care about mine. Silence. Finally, she whispered, I'll fight for this marriage. There's nothing left to fight for. You can't just stop loving me. I laughed bitterly. Sherry, read the divorce petition. I'm giving you the house, half of everything, joint custody, more than you deserve. But if you fight me, I'll make sure everyone sees the videos. Your parents, your sister, your friends. You wouldn't, she choked out. Try me, I said. Another sob. Then finally, defeat. Okay, she whispered. Sherry and I ended the call, and soon after, she signed the divorce papers. 6 months later, it was officially over. She stayed in the house with Shelby and Ryan, while I found a condo just a few streets away so I could be close to the kids. Since we kept them in the same school district, their day-to-day routine stayed mostly the same. Even though the divorce hurt them, there was no way around that. They were shielded from the ugliest parts of it. Shelby confided in me once that Sherry admitted to her how badly she'd messed up, how her own choices had torn our family apart. Both Sherry and I made it clear to the kids that no matter what happened between us, we would always be their parents, always be there for them. I never asked Sherry what she told her parents or her sister about our split, but since none of them cut ties with me, I figured she didn't try to twist the story or pin the blame on me. My own mother, though, well, Sherry knew there was no point trying to hide the truth from her. My mom saw right through it. Before I left that part of my life behind for good, I had one final chance to retrieve the voice recorder from Sherry's car. That last recording is burned into my memory. On her drive home that day, she called Greg to gush about their afternoon together, but her excitement quickly gave way to unease. I think Jack might be getting suspicious, she said. We should probably lay low for a bit, at least until I'm sure he's not onto us. Then she pulled into our neighborhood, and the confusion in her voice was instant. Why are there so many people standing around? What's going on? And then she saw it. The signs, the photos, the whole brutal display laid out on our front lawn. Her scream was so loud it nearly maxed out the recorder's audio levels. What did you do, Jack? What the hell did you do? But her anger quickly crumbled under the weight of reality. Her voice broke, trembling with panic and self-loathing. Oh my God, oh God, no, what did I do? What have I done? Please, God, no, please make this all go away. Somehow she managed to call Greg. The second he picked up, she was nearly incoherent. He knows, Greg. Jack knows everything. He knows about us. After that, all I heard was uncontrollable sobbing. It's been over a year since that day, since everything came crashing down around all of us. And somehow, I've started rebuilding. I'm not dating, and if I'm being honest, I probably won't for a long time. The thought of opening my heart to someone again and of trusting anyone after living through that level of betrayal feels impossible right now. Shelby mentioned once that Sherry tried going on a date, but she came home crying. From what I can tell, she never attempted dating again. Eventually, Sherry found work as an administrative assistant at a nearby retirement community. I never asked if she kept in contact with Greg. Frankly, I don't care. Unsurprisingly, Greg's wife divorced him, and from what I've heard, his career has never recovered. Even though I never followed through on my threat to release the videos to anyone, Sherry always knew I was fully capable of doing it if I felt provoked. Apparently, the rumors alone were enough to ruin Greg's reputation. It turns out the companies aren't exactly eager to hire a man known for wrecking marriages, especially when the whole town knew the story. I made sure to blur Sherry's face in the footage that circulated, but I left Greg's voice crystal clear. Everyone knew exactly who he was. Recently, I heard Greg's ex-wife has been seeing a police officer, a solid guy by all accounts, and it sounds like they're getting serious. I'm happy for her. She deserved better. As for Greg's old company, they were so eager to avoid the public spectacle of a lawsuit that they cut me a very generous settlement check. I took it, and as far as I'm concerned, that chapter is firmly closed. My focus now is exactly where it should be, on Shelby and Ryan, making sure their future is stable and bright. Maybe someday I'll think about my own future too, but right now, they're all that matters.